All right, let's dive in today. We're going big picture this time, looking at how villages can team up to tackle those huge regional challenges.
You know, the things that one village just can't handle on its own.
Exactly. Think transportation, energy. We're talking district and bioregional councils today, and we're pulling insights from Roots of Resilience.
Great source.
But, the question that always pops up is, what's in it for me?
Right. Like, why should I care if I'm not actually on one of these councils?
That's the key, isn't it? So how do these councils actually benefit the average person?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting, because these councils can actually give smaller villages more power.
More power. How does that work? It seems kind of counterintuitive.
Think of it this way. Imagine your village needs a new bridge, right? But the cost, way too high.
Yeah, you're kind of stuck at that point.
Right, you're stuck. But as part of a district council, you can pool your resources with other villages.
Ah, I see. So everyone who needs the bridge chips in.
Exactly. Suddenly, it's affordable, and you've got more people fighting for it, more voices to get it done.
So it's like, collective bargaining.
Yeah, kinda. Like a big group discount, but for entire communities.
I like that. A community discount.
Huh. Roots of Resilience actually uses this great example, a bunch of rural Brazilian villages that needed a solar grid.
A whole grid? That's ambitious.
It was. Spanned 15 villages, way too big for any one village to pull off alone, but the district council made it happen.
Wow, that's really impressive. But how do you even begin to make sure everyone's voice is heard at that scale?
Right. You've got all these different villages, all these different needs.
Yeah, does it just become a shouting match?
Well, that's where the whole idea of representation comes in. It's not just about sending somebody to the district council.
It's about making sure they actually represent their village's interests.
Exactly. And Roots of Resilience dives deep into this, talks about the challenges of balancing all those different needs and making sure everyone feels heard.
Okay, so it's not as simple as like one village, one vote.
No, it can get more complicated than that. The source talks about weighted representation.
Weighted? What does that mean?
Well, it means that some villages might have more say based on things like population size or how much they're affected by a certain issue.
I can see how that could get pretty tricky.
It does. It can get nuanced. But the book really emphasizes that even smaller villages, they can actually gain more influence this way.
More influence. So being part of a district council actually levels the playing field a bit.
It can. It's all about strategy, finding allies, and advocating for shared interests.
Okay, so there's a real art to navigating these councils, finding those win-win scenarios.
Absolutely, finding ways for everyone to benefit.
But let's be real, conflict is inevitable, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. But Roots of Resilience gives us a roadmap for those situations. They actually have a whole conflict resolution protocol.
Ah, so it's not about avoiding conflict altogether.
Right. It's about managing it constructively.
So how does that work? What does this protocol look like?
Well, it's all about finding common ground, even when things get heated. They even suggest using neutral mediators.
Mediators? You mean
Yeah.
like professional negotiators?
Yeah, people trained in conflict resolution, but also familiar with the region.
I see. So they can help the villages see the bigger picture.
Exactly. And that's key. Helping everyone find solutions that actually work for everyone involved.
It's like having a referee, but for like inter-village disputes,
Yeah.
right? Making sure things stay fair.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about conflict, but I'm curious about the kinds of projects these councils actually take on. We talked about that solar grid in Brazil, but what else? What are some other real-world examples?
Well, regional transportation planning is a big one. Imagine coordinating bus routes or ride-sharing programs across multiple villages.
Yeah, that could be a game changer.
Right. Easier commutes, easier access to services, less reliance on cars.
It makes a lot of sense, but wouldn't something like that require tons of coordination?
Yeah.
And compromise?
Of course. But that's where a strong district council comes in. It's about finding those solutions that work for the whole region.
So it's about shifting from a me to a we mentality.
Yeah, exactly. Thinking about the collective good.
That makes sense. But what about those really big challenges, the ones that even a whole region might struggle with?
You mean like climate change?
Yeah, exactly. Can these councils really make a dent in something that big?
That's where things get really interesting. Roots of Resilience suggests forming something called federations.
Federations. So you're saying district councils could actually join forces?
Exactly. It's like a council of councils, a way to pool resources and expertise to tackle those really large-scale problems.
Wow, that's taking the microcircle concept to a whole new level.
It is. It's about scaling up that idea of interconnected communities.
I love it. But how do you even begin to organize something that massive? Wouldn't it be super complex?
Well, that's a valid concern for sure. But Roots of Resilience is all about decentralized governance, even within these larger federations.
So it's not about creating this huge top-down bureaucracy.
No, not at all. The idea is that local councils still have a lot of autonomy.
So they can collaborate on those shared goals without losing their independence.
Precisely. It's a balancing act for sure.
Sounds like it. But I'm definitely intrigued. I want to hear more about how these federations actually work in practice.
Well, that's a perfect segue into our next segment. We were just talking about those federations, those councils of councils.
Yeah, that concept's really blown my mind.
Right. It's a game changer.
But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's zoom back in a little.
Back to the district councils?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We talked about representation, but I'm curious about the nitty-gritty.
The details of how it all works.
Yeah, how do you make sure a delegate actually reflects what their village wants? It can't be easy.
You're telling me. Roots of Resilience really emphasizes that it's not enough just to send someone.
You need guidelines, structures, all that.
Yep. You got to make sure those delegates are accountable, that they really listen to their people.
But at the same time, they have to be able to compromise, right? To see the bigger picture.
That's the sweet spot, balancing those local interests with the needs of the whole region.
Tough job. So what does Roots of Resilience suggest? How do you find that balance?
Well, they've got a few ideas. One is being really clear about how you choose delegates in the first place.
So it's not just sending your buddy who's good at talking.
No, not just charisma. You need someone with experience.
Someone who's actually led in their community.
Exactly. And someone who understands the issues, someone who knows what they're talking about.
Okay, makes sense. So you've got your delegate, now what?
Well, Roots of Resilience suggests things like regular feedback sessions.
So the delegate has to keep in touch with the village, make sure they're on the same page.
Yep. It's an ongoing conversation, not just a one-time thing. And they also recommend term limits.
Term limits, like you can only be a delegate for so long.
Right. Keeps things fresh, prevents anyone from getting too comfortable in that position of power.
Smart. So it's like a mini democracy within the village itself.
You got it. Making sure the delegate really reflects what the community wants, even as those wants change over time. But, even with all these safeguards, conflict happens.
It's inevitable, right? People disagree. So how do you handle that?
Well, remember that conflict resolution protocol we talked about? That comes in handy.
The one with the neutral mediators.
Yeah, exactly. Roots of Resilience suggests a whole hierarchy of ways to deal with conflict.
Okay, so you don't jump right to the mediators.
No, you start small. Try to work things out at the village level first.
So like, if two villages have a disagreement, they sit down and talk it out before going to the council.
Exactly. Direct communication is always best.
Yeah.
But if that doesn't work, then you escalate things.
And that's when the mediators step in.
Right. They're like the specialists,
The conflict whisperers.
Yeah.
Helping everyone find that middle ground.
Exactly. They'd know the region, understand the culture, be able to help folks find solutions that everyone can live with. And Roots of Resilience even gives you a framework.
A framework.
Yeah, a whole structure for how those mediations should happen.
Wow, that's thorough. But I gotta ask, this all seems very structured.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, don't get me wrong, structure's good. But how do you make these councils, fun?
Different.
Okay, maybe not fun, but engaging, accessible to regular people.
I see what you mean. You don't want it to feel like just a bunch of politicians talking, right?
Exactly.
Well, Roots of Resilience really stresses transparency, making sure everyone in the community feels like they can participate.
So how do you do that?
Public meetings, for one thing. Places where anyone can come and voice their concerns, share their ideas.
So it's about making sure the council's work is visible to everyone.
Exactly. And they even talk about using technology.
Ooh, technology, like what?
Well, they suggest online forums where people can discuss stuff, give feedback.
That makes sense. A way for people to participate even if they can't make it to a meeting.
Right. Makes it more convenient. But let's get real for a second. This is all great in theory.
Yeah, but does it actually work?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And Roots of Resilience says yes. They've got all these amazing case studies.
Oh, I love a good case study. Any of that stand out?
Well, there's this one about the Mondragon Cooperative Corporation in Spain.
Mondragon?
Yeah.
I've heard of them. They're like the legendary co-op, right?
They are, and they're a perfect example of how these councils can work in the real world.
So how does Mondragon fit into this whole district council idea?
Well, imagine a network of worker-owned co-ops all across different industries. Manufacturing, finance, retail, you name it. all working together in one region.
So each co-op is like a village.
Kinda. They've got their own thing going on, but they also collaborate, support each other, share resources, make decisions together.
And this is all happening within a larger structure like a district council.
Exactly. And the results are incredible. Mondragon's created tons of jobs, built a really strong community.
Wow, so it's about more than just economics.
Way more. It's about people, about building a better society, and it proves that this kind of collaborative model can really work.
I love it. Proof that cooperation can actually lead to success.
Ah.
Any other inspiring examples out there?
Oh, tons. Roots of Resilience also talks about the transition town movement. Have you heard of them?
Transition towns, yeah, they're all about like eco-living, right? Sustainability.
That's them. Building resilience, figuring out how to thrive in the face of climate change, economic instability, all that.
So are they using district councils?
Yeah, a lot of them operate on a district or bioregional scale. They connect different neighborhoods, villages,
So they can coordinate their efforts.
Exactly. They work on things like local food systems, renewable energy, building a more localized economy.
So they're taking the principles of district councils and using them to create a more sustainable world.
Bingo. And the best part is, each transition town does it a little differently. They adapt the principles to fit their own needs.
So there's no one right way to do it.
Nope. It's all about finding what works best for your community. But now you've got me thinking, how do these councils handle those really huge challenges?
Yeah, the ones that even a whole region might struggle with.
Exactly. Climate change is the big one, right? That requires a massive level of coordination.
Way bigger than just one region, for sure.
Right. And that's where those federation models come back in.
The councils of councils.
Yep. Roots of Resilience talks about how those district councils can team up to create even bigger networks.
Whoa, so you're talking national level, international even.
Potentially. Imagine district councils from all over the world working together.
That's mind-blowing. So how does that even work? Wouldn't it be chaos?
Well, Roots of Resilience emphasizes decentralization.
So even within these huge federations, local councils still have a say.
Absolutely. It's not about a central authority calling all the shots.
More like a network, where everyone has a voice, but they're also working together.
Exactly. Local knowledge is still valued, but now it's amplified by those regional and global connections.
Powerful stuff. But how do you keep these federations from becoming too bureaucratic, too top-heavy?
Great question. Roots of Resilience suggests creating representative bodies.
So each district council gets a seat at the table.
Yep. And they talk about clear communication channels, ways to make sure everyone stays in the loop.
So it's about finding that balance again.
Always about balance.
Yeah.
Collaboration without sacrificing that local control. And they give some real-world examples.
Ooh, let's hear them. These federations actually exist.
They do. One example they highlight is the European Network for Rural Development.
So that's like a federation of rural development councils.
Exactly. All these councils across the EU working together to support rural communities.
Wow, so this isn't just some hippie dream, it's actually happening.
It's happening, and it shows that these models can work within governments too, not just grassroots movements.
That's really encouraging. Any other examples, ones that are maybe a little more grassroots?
Well, remember the transition network we talked about earlier?
The transition towns.
Well, they actually operate on a federation model too.
Really? So they've gone global.
Totally. They've got regional hubs all over the world coordinating the efforts of all those transition towns.
It's like a planet-wide web of eco-warriors.
Kinda. But seriously, it shows how diverse these federation models can be, from hyperlocal to totally global.
It's pretty inspiring, but I want to bring it back to our listener for a second.
Back down to earth.
Exactly. Because all of this is fascinating, but what does it mean for someone who's not on a council?
The so what question. That's a good one.
Right. Why should they care?
Well, Roots of Resilience argues that even if you're not part of a formal council, understanding these models can change how you think about your community.
So it's not just about structures and rules. It's about a way of thinking.
Exactly. It's about asking yourself, what challenges does my community face? Who else cares about this stuff? How can we work together to make things better?
So it's taking those principles, collaboration, shared purpose, and applying them to your own life.
Exactly. Whether it's through a neighborhood group, a volunteer organization, whatever.
It's about recognizing that we all have a role to play in building a better world.
Absolutely. And Roots of Resilience is full of Ideas, strategies, real-world examples that you can learn from.
It's like a toolkit for change makers.
Yeah.
It is. It's like Roots of Resilience is giving us permission to dream big, but also showing us how to get there.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just about these big ideas, it's about practical steps.
Speaking of practical steps, where do you even start with all this? It can feel kind of overwhelming.
Oh, absolutely. And Roots of Resilience gets that. They talk about the importance of quick wins.
Quick wins. I like the sound of that.
Right. It's about starting small, achieving something tangible, showing people that change is possible.
So it's like those fitness challenges. You start with just walking 15 minutes a day.
Exactly. You prove to yourself you can do it.
Builds momentum, builds confidence.
Exactly. And those small wins can have a ripple effect, inspire others to get involved.
So what kind of quick wins are we talking about?
Well, they give examples like a neighborhood cleanup day or starting a community garden.
Ah, those are great. Practical, but also like feel-good projects.
Right. They address a real need, bring people together, and show that positive change is possible.
It's like planting a seed, literally in the case of the garden.
Ah, I love that.
But seriously, those seeds can grow into something much bigger, inspire more action.
Absolutely. And as you rack up those quick wins, you create this sense of possibility.
Like snowball effect. Starts small but keeps growing.
Exactly. And suddenly those big challenges don't seem so insurmountable.
That's encouraging. But let's shift gears for a minute. Talk about you, the listener.
All right, bringing it back to the individual level.
Yeah. Because we've covered a lot of ground today. But what's the takeaway? What can you do with all this?
Well, Roots of Resilience encourages us to look around our communities and ask, what are the issues that get me fired up?
The things I really care about.
Exactly. Maybe it's safer bike lanes, a tool-sharing library, a community-owned energy project.
So it's about tapping into that passion, that desire to make a difference.
Absolutely. And remember, you don't have to start from scratch. Roots of Resilience is full of examples, strategies you can adapt.
It's about learning from others, finding inspiration in those success stories.
Exactly. Recognizing that you're not alone in this. There are people all over the world doing this work.
So the message is, don't underestimate the power of small actions. Find your people, connect with them, and start building that more resilient future.
One step at a time. And hey, if you achieve any of those quick wins, we want to hear about it.
Definitely. Share your stories with us. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.